I gotta see what's going on here.
Sorry, man. It's gonna take a lot of scotch for me tonight to feign interest in what's happening in WCL.
Dude, it's way more interesting than what's happening in UAFBL, right? Are there any interesting races in UAFBL? Did anyone pay $2 at the deadline to buy AD from Emmer so that he could win eighth place? Yeah, seventh isn't happening for me. Dang. Seventh isn't happening.
Sorry, buddy.
It's okay. I mean, dude, I locked it last night. I was in 10th. I was solidly in 10th.
So you're gonna finish in ninth?
No, I'm gonna finish in eighth.
Eighth. All right.
I was in
Mazel
10th
tov.
last night. And
Mazel
then
tov.
I bought AD and Westbrook for $2.
That's
And
kind of amazing. That's actually pretty amazing.
it's amazing, right? The guy that was in first was so far ahead in first. He was like, whatever, I don't need these guys. And they were on expiring deals. So he was like, he texted me last night. He was like, if you want to buy these guys, he was acting like it was going to be kind of like more cash involved. So I just sent him a random offer. It was like at midnight, I saw he hadn't made a deal. So I was like, I'll give you $2 for AD plus Westbrook. And he insta accepted.
Can you help Emmer? He's like talking about laptops and shit.
No, dude, he's on.
I just joined.
Oh, nice. What's up, dude?
Hey, you guys hear me all right?
Mm-hmm.
Crystal clear.
You're a little loud. Am I a little loud?
Well, no more so than usual.
Yeah. I mean,
I think we should err on the side of being too loud. Sometimes when I try to listen to this at the gym, it's hard to hear.
no, but
I'd rather be.
I think it's been better since we've been doing hangouts.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
I'll give somebody 10 UAFBL auction dollars for next year if they can tell me what episode we're up to on this season.
I don't know. Do we count rogue pods in the numbering?
No, those are usually halves.
Emmerly,
I think one time we did like episode like 3 3/4 because there was like 2 rogues before we got back to a regular one.
Emmer, if we had not had a trade deadline, let's just say hypothetically we did not have a trade deadline, and I had come to you like 2 nights ago and said, I'll give you $2 for 2 top 10 players. Wouldn't that have made the league more interesting for everybody?
I don't know. I was sweating this out up until the end. I probably would have said no.
Says the guy with Anthony Davis on his bench with like 4 blocks and 3 steals tonight.
And LeBron and Whiteside and Harden.
Oh no, I just fell to ninth. What is going on?
Wait, yeah. Can we just since this is all the podcast is going to be, can we just start?
Yeah.
Is there anything? We don't need to talk about anything, right?
I mean,
I just
I didn't even look at the rundown. So is that a problem?
You didn't look at the rundown? That's
Not
fine.
really.
It was one of my worst.
I'm glancing at it now. You go ahead and start.
So we've had one podcast in the last 2 months, and it was Caged Bird Edition.
That's right. Yeah, we're up to. I'm there. We're up to 8.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to season 3, episode 8 of the Collier Pod, our now 3rd annual at least season finale edition. With me, I'm David Horn, owner of the 12th place Fuck You Height Jabberwocks, and with me are Brian Lusky, owner of the WCL, soon to be 8th place. What's your stupid name in WCL?
B Lusk's Dirty Dogs.
B Lusk's Dirty Dogs, and hi Lusky, welcome.
Hi. And you failed to mention this is I'm 10th place in the UAFBL, and I think I should go back. This is maybe my worst finish ever, maybe.
Yeah, well, you really mismanaged the entire season. And with us as well is our soon to be. I don't want to jinx it. I really don't want to jinx it. I know anything can happen. The NBA is weird, but I'm just gonna say it. I'm gonna own it. Our soon to be champion, Leonine Faces, manager of the Leonine Faces, Brian Emmer. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me. I am sweating it out over here.
That isn't too jinxy. I mean, this is locked up.
Well, I don't know. If Joe Ingles, Gerald Green, and PJ Tucker combined for 22 turnovers, anything could happen tonight.
So wait, what did you just describe happening? That would mean that who would overtake whom in turnovers?
So the decision I've been wrestling with all day and watching the early games is how much to risk going forward here. And as of a few days ago, it was much tighter. It's definitely a lot more comfortable now than it was, but it really had been tight. And the pivotal race would have been turnovers, I think, and blocks, but I got a little bit of separation there recently. But either one of those, if he'd caught me, then it would have been a 2 point swing. So my lead going into today was 3. And Gabe had a lot of categories where he had some fairly easy points to pick up, or he very realistically could have picked up 3 more points, or maybe even 4 between threes and steals, and then points with Phil. So the decision that I had to make was balancing how likely was it today that he was going to get 3 points there to tie me. And then I had a point that I could have tried to pick up against Beer and threes, but it would have put me at risk in turnovers in that 2 point swing. So it was something that I spent a lot of time worrying about. And thankfully, so far, it's looked like it's not going to be that close as I was worried that it was going to be. But it was a little bit stressful there for the last few days.
Lusk, did you follow all that?
Not at all. So here's my question. I always think about this. Like I don't know if we're just bad at like the last week of the season or something, but it's like this weird thing. Like Emmer started this trend, 8 years ago or something when he did this whole like I'm gonna sit on my games played and then make them all up once I have a super team, which is obviously the has been the rage ever since then. But then we forget that in the last week, like the good players aren't reliable anymore. So there's like this. So there's like this. I always wonder, like, should we maximize our games played and hustle to get them all in and hope that there's like no more strategy left to be done in the last 3 or 4 nights of the season.
Right. You don't want to be the guy who's like worrying about how many minutes your star is going to get as his playoff bound team is winding things down.
Yeah, and like all the stuff that Emmer just rattled off, like who knows on a night like tonight, like half these teams,
there's so much noise. There's so much noise this week.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's 2 things there. Like this year, I think especially more teams have cared about the last few games of the season. There's been more like seeding implications for these games, so people have been playing, or teams have been playing more guys. The other thing is when you have a lot of depth, you can have a couple guys set out and you can just plug in replacements that are pretty good still. But most importantly to me, so the things that I cared about these last few nights were actually things where I was like hoping that my stars were going to get rested. So I picked up Gerald Green and PJ Tucker. And if the only 2 categories that matter to me are turnovers and threes, then I'd actually rather have Gerald Green starting than James Harden.
Why do you say you hope that your guys would get rested? Just because it wouldn't force you to have to like make a tough decision? It would like solve the problem for you?
Well, no, I mean, I think Gerald Green, if he gets 30 minutes tonight, is not going to be a significant downgrade in threes from Harden with far less turnovers.
I see, right. It limits your downside. It limits your downside risk.
As Gabe and I have been really close in turnovers, Harden's had some games where he's had 7 or 8 turnovers. Gerald Green is like 1 or 2 turnovers. PJ Tucker's the same way. And if they're getting more minutes, they're probably good for 2 threes. So it's just a safer play for me. And it has a lot more to do with the category battles and where my upside is and where I'm safe.
Why isn't your play now to just rest all your guys, right? Or are you doing that? Like, can you pull any guys from the last round of games?
Yeah, I pulled most of them. I still have Gerald Green and PJ Tucker and Joe Ingles in there.
But if you preserve the turnover point, doesn't that seal the deal for you?
Probably. I mean, I'm probably fine either way. But the reason for playing them was that if Gabe was able to pick up those other category points, and then the point against Beer and threes would still mean that I win outright.
But I don't think Gabe's going to pick. Like, if I were you. Right now, like the only games Gabe has left are Rubio, KCP.
I think Rubio's at a position where he's maxed out, I think.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. The only guy he's got left is Randall.
Right.
So I think your play is to pull your guys. I think you're done. I think just don't get any more turnovers and you've won the thing.
Right. So I think for him to tie me, Randall would have to get 22 threes.
Right. Tonight. So that's too silly. Yeah. So you're done. Yeah. So as long as just preserve that point and then you're done.
Right. But I mean, the likelihood of those 3 guys getting 23 turnovers between them is.
But it's more likely than Randall hitting 22 threes.
Why even risk it?
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
understand why you wouldn't just pull them.
Yeah, you're probably right.
I'm not sure.
I say fuck it.
Am I missing something? Am I missing
See what
something?
happens.
No, no. That's so wrong. You're a man of reason, Brian Emmer. You're a man of science. You see the data.
So, what is the career high of turnovers in a single game for each of those three guys? Joe Ingles, Gerald Green, and PJ Tucker.
Lusk, you want to hazard a guess?
Wait, PJ Tucker, Gerald Green.
PJ Tucker's probably never had more than 3 turnovers in a game.
I mean, like, I bet I doubt any of those three has ever. I mean, you think any of those three has ever had more than 4, maybe 5 turnovers in a game? I don't know.
I doubt it. I really doubt it. Those guys don't even get to touch the ball, man.
Yeah. All right, you talked me into it. I'm moving at least.
You're hedging.
Wait, Tucker's the one you're gonna sit?
I don't know. I just loved Joe Ingles. I gotta leave him in the lineup.
Yeah, he'll probably have 24 turnovers himself.
Well, if he does, then you can say it.
Dude, what a shitty game from Paul George today. He's really been a big disappointment for the Leon Faces all season, huh?
I know. Tolliver too.
8 threes, 40 points, 2 steals and a block on 13 of 20 field goal.
Yeah, he had a hell of a night.
He heard you whispering about his 28 calendar day streak of what was it?
I wish it was 28 calendar days.
It was since like December. What was this? Since like December or something?
Yeah, so let's ask Lusky. How long do you think it's been that so the last game that Paul George made as many field goals as he missed?
He made as many field goals. I mean, you're just saying the last time he shot north of 50%?
Or 50%.
Or 50% even.
I don't know, like 3 weeks.
As of yesterday, it was 57 calendar days.
Wow, that's a long time.
Ever since Kevin Hart beat him in the 3-point shootout at All-Star Weekend, he has not shot 50% in a game since then.
Wait, did he shoot 50%? Did he shoot 50% in the immediate game preceding the All-Star break?
What was the date of the All-Star break?
It was like February. It was like the weekend of February 16th.
I think it was February 4th. No, February 14th. February 14th. It was. Yeah. It was literally the game before the All-Star break.
The last game before the All-Star break, Paul George shot 50%. Then Kevin Hart beat him, and he hasn't shot 50% until tonight.
And he shot like 36% down the stretch here.
That's amazing. Are you guys watching the Nuggets Timberwolves game?
No.
It's tied with 4.5 seconds to go, and the winner goes to the playoffs, and the loser does not.
I'm gonna pull this up.
Oh shit!
And Nuggets have it with 4.5 seconds to go. Lusky, who do you go to if you're the Nuggets for the last shot?
I feel like it's got to be
Barton.
Oh, it's Jokic.
Barton. It's Jokic. Oh, it's terrible. Oh, no. He wasn't fouled there? Dude, Taj with some serious defense. Dude, what a terrible, terrible set to run with your entire fucking season on the line. Like Jokic in the corner with Gibson on him.
I'm trying to find a stream on Reddit.
Oh, man. Emma, are you watching this? Oof.
That was pretty terrible.
Oof. Lusky, how much do you care about from an NBA perspective, the outcome of like these kinds of games? Like, how much do you care about whether the Timberwolves or the Nuggets are in the playoffs?
I do. I actually. So I like the Nuggets. I'm a little bit saddened to see that they haven't like made a step up. So I would like to see them win this game.
Emmer, how about you?
I like these games. I don't like the feeling that like you're just waiting for the Rockets playing the Warriors to decide who's going to win the championship, and these games feel like they matter as much as anything else for these teams.
Yeah, I mean, neither of these teams are going to like challenge the Warriors or the Rockets. So it's more about like the it's more about sort of like the trajectory of these franchises, like over like a 5 or 10 year period. Like where does this
Exactly. The
Nuggets team stand
development,
in 2018?
right? The development of guys like Karl Anthony Towns and Jokic.
Yeah. Like, are the Wolves serious? Like, it would I mean, they had Butler missing for all these months or weeks, whatever it's been, but like, it would be really bad if the Timberwolves don't make the playoffs.
It feels
Although they
like it would be
haven't.
appropriate for Wiggy to hit a game winner here.
For who? Wiggins?
Wiggins.
Crawford?
That was awesome.
Yeah, both these teams are pretty interesting. I mean, but the weird thing is that like the T Wolves expectations were pretty sudden this year because they assembled these guys, but the Nuggets did it in a more like organic, kind of homegrown fashion, right? With the exception of Millsap. Oh,
That's right.
oh,
Yeah, I think Murray. I think the fact that Murray matured this year raised the expectations a little bit. Like, they're not really that good of a team. They just sort of they have Jokic and then like a whole bunch of like really interesting, um, like but like not star guards and wings.
yeah, it's like Harris, Murray, Barton's been really good.
You're the president and CEO of the Will Barton fan club.
Dude, who isn't? Everybody loves Will Barton, right? Will Barton's one of those guys that, like, when you look at him, he doesn't look like he should be good at basketball, and then he's like their best playmaker.
Um, while we're in commercial on this game, that's gonna draw my attention when it comes back.
This is
One
part
of
of
the
the
points.
pod that Askin edits out later, right?
No. This will be good. People are going to want to hear about our views on this game second by second, 3 days after 3 days after it occurs.
No, wait, Amish is already calling for it to be released before 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, so he can get on his plane.
Give the people what they want. Emmer, what? Talk a little bit about the categories overall this year. I think that I suffer, I think, from an assumption about what categories are going to be the most important during the arms race in a particular year. I think, like, without ever having evaluated it, I always assume that blocks and threes and dimes are the most important categories based on past arms races. Has that been true this year, or have my sense is that like rebounds and turnovers turned out to be like more important?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a tough question, and it depends on like at which phase of the season you're talking about. Uh, I think like towards the end, the head-to-head 2 point swing between me and Gabe became very important for a couple categories. But for like the bulk of the season, like it was clear that I was like comfortably ahead in blocks, that I could effectively ignore it in the arms race, unless I really, wanted to obsess over that 2 point swing. For me, it was more like early on, like trying to imagine how my season was going to play out and what categories I would be strong in and what categories I would be trading away that I would have to make up for. So like when I went into the draft, I knew that like my two big chips were Jokic and Porzingis. And so like Jokic, I thought was going to be a field goal anchor for me. So I wanted to be really strong with field goal percentage so that I could afford to deal away field goal percentage in the arms race and not sink in that category, knowing that I was coming from a position of strength already. And like with Porzingis, the same thing with blocks. So I was like really like very focused on big man categories early on. But I also, wanted to concentrate my spending too. So I think like when you feel like you have some chips that you're going to be able to trade later, you feel like you can get depth later.
Right.
So I didn't want to get like a lot of middling players, like fourth, fifth round guys. I wanted to be top heavy with the idea that I could round out my roster later. And I think it's just easier to do that with a lot of like point guards, perimeter players.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of how I like went into it. It was that I wanted to like add depth in my front court so that I could trade those guys later. And then also like imagining what I would get in those races too. So, I wanted to target some of the, blue chip players to get back. And I imagine guys like Westbrook and Harden would be the ones that I would target. And so I wanted to set up my team from the beginning with that in mind, trying to balance that all out. And I guess, the other part of this too is knowing that like I thought that it was going to take a lot of roto points to win, that you couldn't win with 95 or 96 roto points this year, going up against Gabe especially. And so, whether or not I blew past other teams in dimes or points or whatever, at some point there's diminishing returns there. And I felt like percentages were really limiting. So, I spent almost the entire season obsessing over percentages. And then there were a few counting stats that I had to address during the arms race, but really I, completely focused on field goal percentage mostly, and then free throw percentage to a lesser extent.
Yeah. Lusk, do you have a sort of an innate sense, or have you looked at, looking at UFBL history, which categories have tended to be the ones that, in fact, are most in demand by the buyers during the arms race?
Yeah, I mean, my sense is that it's field goal percentage, steals, and blocks. I feel like those three categories end up being the ones that end up being the tightest in the very end. Steals and blocks in particular, just because like the quantities are so small that you're dealing in, that inevitably like the like making up ground there, if you really focus, can be done if you're like trying to close a window in 2 or 3 weeks.
It's funny. I actually think the opposite. I think we actually fool ourselves because those numbers are so small. The raw numbers are so small, so we see a gap of like 18 steals or 12 blocks with a couple weeks to go, and we think that's easily closed, but it's not, and it's actually very hard to close those gaps. I don't know if you've noticed, I've been like between like 10 and 20 blocks behind you for the last couple of weeks, and I've been like eyeing that point because I've been trying to catch height. And I've had some good blocks nights. You've had especially at the end of the season, as we discussed, there's so much noise. It's very hard to actually close those gaps with a month to go.
I'm not asserting that like teams in 12th and 9th place can
but 10
make
blocks,
a lot of
but 10 blocks are 10 blocks. I mean, it's.
I mean, I remember being in Emmer's position last year and like, having a spreadsheet lined up, and you're like, and frankly, it was like that was closing most of the gaps against me at that point. And you start saying like, wow, like Horn's team on average is, per player is averaging 1.3 steals more than my guys are per night. And then
at some point that has to close. The gap has to close. Yeah, and that's actually Emmer. One thing that Gabe has said to me over the last couple of days, even the last couple even like last week or two, is like he feels good about his like closing rate. It's just he needs another like week or two of the season to actually close.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things I was planning on saying tonight. Like, I feel like this season is ending just in time. Like, I feel like the trajectory of our teams is that Gabe would pass me in about a week or two from now.
Yeah, I think that's his sense as well.
Yeah. And with blocks, so I mean, there is a lot of noise, but that was one of the head-to-head category battles that Gabe and I had that was crucial, and that's why I targeted like Derek Favors and played a lot of like big heavy lineups. But even like a week ago, I was only ahead by like 10 blocks, and it was closing fast. And Gabe had one night where he had like 13 blocks, and I had 2 blocks, and I was really convinced that he was going to pass me there and get a 2-point swing.
So speaking of noise, one of the questions I wanted to ask you both, Emmer, you probably have a better sense of this, is like in terms of like putting injuries aside, over the last couple of weeks, or maybe on the season, like what have been the weird sort of statistical outliers in terms of either like a couple of games over the last week or two where your players or Gabe's players just did something totally sort of at the margins of the bell-shaped curve, or something over a stretch of time, over several weeks or the last month, let's say, that one of your players has just totally outperformed expectations or totally underperformed expectations, such that it materially impacted the race.
You mean besides Kevin Hart being a better shooter than Paul George?
Yes, that's everyone knows that.
No, I mean, I'm sure that like I have overperformers and underperformers, and Gabe does too. But the nature of this, when you're obsessing over it and like, just dying over every last detail, is that you focus on the things that are more painful, or at least I do. Maybe that says something about me. But I think about like Paul George was like killing me. Like when it actually got really close in field goal for a while there's 3 guys that are just like 3 points behind me. And I was really worried I was going to fall behind, or it took me a long time to pass them. I was worried I wasn't going to pass them.
Mm-hmm.
So that was excruciating. And then when things got really tight with Gabe on blocks, LeBron went like 9 or 10 games in a row without a single block. and that was just super painful. I know I have guys that overperformed in the other direction too, but it doesn't cause me as much anxiety, so they don't come to mind as much. Like Valanciunas was amazing after the All-Star break.
That's right.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite players. Yeah. I mean, early in the season, Tyreek was incredible, but that wasn't like so much of a post-arms race issue.
No, but those are the little. I mean, especially this year where you had these two extremely strong teams the whole season. There were little things like Paul Gasol was another instance where you had a guy that was undervalued that you got. I mean, how many games? I haven't looked at your like team log, but like Gasol must have played 60 games for you this year, right?
Yeah, I think 50.
Yeah. I mean,
solid. Like I really had to like not focus on the day to day with Gasol and just like take a step back and look at his season averages, because on any given night he would play 12 minutes and put up a really stinker of a line. But
but also some of that's like percentages and shit like that doesn't show up on a night to night basis.
And he didn't hurt me in any way. And like I needed the depth. Like surprisingly, like I was struggling with depth for the first half of the season, and him and Tyreek especially were critical for me.
Yeah. Lusk, you and I both know that to win one of these things, you need guys like that. You need to hit your Tyreeks and your Gasols and have those, sort of like, top 75, top 100 guys at the right price who you get from the go, who are contributors, until you can make your bigger moves. Do you have a sense that is less important in UAFBL these days because of red weddings and because of the nature of the arms race, or is it as important as ever?
Well, maybe a little bit. I mean, to a degree, right? This year was a bit of an anomaly just because, I mean, I think these two teams from the outset had better rosters than most teams do, just because we had those two big Lone Star League keeper deals. So they came in with like an additional superstar each, basically. But I do think like in Emmer's case in particular, like some of the moves that he made in the arms race to pick up guys that like it was weird, like the type of players you're describing, like where you pick up guys off the waiver wire who can give you a few good games here and there. Like I think it was less of that this year, and my perception is that it was more of targeting guys in the arms race who like weren't extremely expensive, but could help your team in the categories you need. Emmer mentioned Derek Favors being one of those guys for him. I think that like you did the same thing with Harrison Barnes. I don't know how much playing time he got for you, but I remember that being like a very early arms race deal, and you're like looking for someone just like a warm.
I couldn't believe I would like look at your team, like in February and March and see you starting Harrison Barnes, and it's just like, what the fuck is he doing? Like, there's no way that's the way. Like, there's no way that he should be starting Harrison Barnes. Like, why didn't you go get better players?
I tried. I couldn't.
And like,
or maybe I was holding out for too good.
I felt the same way. So in our Anthony Davis trade, the second player was Markieff Morris, and it was kind of a head scratcher for me that Emmer even asked for him back. But I was like, okay, like maybe he just, I don't know, like Markieff Morris was barely startable for me, and I was in like 10th place. And so whenever got him and then immediately started starting him, I was like, whoa! And he got a lot of run for you, right, Emmer?
Yeah, he played. I just pulled up my team log. He played 29 games for me this year.
Yeah, and he was pretty good. He actually kind of turned it around right around the time that we made the move. That was, I think you saw that, right?
Yeah, he was exactly what I needed. And Barnes played 31 games for me. I played Jonathan Simmons for 19 games early in the year.
3-year keeper.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think what I did not anticipate. So, like, when I went into the draft, I was thinking I would draft a top-heavy team and I would figure out depth later, and I would bank some games. And then I had some injuries early in the season that made it so I was even more kind of depleted. And what I didn't count on was that in the arms race, that it was a lot harder to acquire depth than I anticipated. And I think, like, some of the deals that happened with Lone Star League guys, especially, took away some of those, like, not top tier guys, but like the depth that I was planning on.
No, that's right. I think UFPL managers need to adjust to if at the beginning of the season there are several teams who are effectively mucking, despite all of our rule changes, then you have to know that like there's just not going to
Trigger
be
warning.
that many trading partners. What's that?
Trigger warning.
Oh, over which part? There was a lot packed in there
Rule
already.
changes.
Oh, Jesus. Look, it's hard to talk about UFPL without talking about the fucking rule changes.
I'm ready to talk about them if you are.
There might be. Let's put it off for a moment. Let's actually. We'll come back to Leonine Faces. Let's talk about the rest of the table. Lusk, how there's sort of there's a tier with like Jones and Bookbinder and some of the guys who were sort of in it for a while and sold off late. Then there's a group that includes like sort of you and Peskin, teams that were never really in it, and were sellers.
Hold on a second. I really should be part of the tier with Books in them. I just completely mismanaged. Like I should have been gunning for Books and Weeg, but my games played situation. I'm leaving like 9 games played on the table, and Books was very much within reach because I'm like he's like just ahead of me in 2 categories. But that's,
I don't think I realized that you mismanaged games, and so you're not able to close on those guys.
Yeah, like I think Books. So if you look at it tonight, so Bookbinder is like 20 boards up on me and 3 steals up on me. If I flip those 2 categories, then we're 1 point apart, and then I'm 1 block behind Weeg. So if I just use my 10 games like and not be a bozo, then I'm at the very least tied with Bookbinder, I think.
Well, talk to me about this whole tier in the middle of the table. Like, do you as I've said 100 times, I don't care that much about the difference between second place and 14th place. As I've said 100 times on the podcast, I think that I don't want to repeat myself about what Bookbinder did last year, but so he's in 8th place, 1 spot above you after last year's Red Wedding.
It should be behind me.
Indeed. How would you characterize these teams from like, let's say 6th place through 11th place in terms of like
their engagement or how well they managed the year or what?
Like where they stand in their own, like the Nuggets, like where do they stand in 2018 in their franchise like trajectories?
Yeah, I mean it's a good question. I mean, I put my team right kind of in the same boat, which is it's not entirely clear how we kind of flip the script here and get things to be competitive. I mean, I think that all of these teams got some amount of assets during the arms race, but nothing that compares to the teams that are at the very bottom. I'm talking about like something to be like we got some pieces for next year, but none of those pieces are like panned out. Will prove to be as valuable as the pieces that you and Amish and Height even all kind of landed on through your scorched earth approach. So I do think from that standpoint, y'all are in a better position. But
that's a dangerous conclusion to reach in UFBL these days. That you can't do anything other than scorched earth is basically the conclusion.
Well, yeah, I mean, and we would have to go, I mean, we will, I'm sure, do this on a future pod, but like we'll have to go through. First of all, doing it right now is not the appropriate time to really grade how well someone is kind of coming into the year. I mean, I think that if I put my team up against Heights or Amish's, like I could probably in my own mind justify that I'm not coming in that far behind either of them. I think you really kind of struck gold with some of your swings that you took. So your approach, I think, clearly separates you from the pack just in that you got Simmons and Donovan. No one else has a level of keeper that's really on par with either of those guys.
Or Torian Prince, for that matter.
Yeah, right. So I think that's what kind of separates it in my eyes. But I do think that like Rumspringer and Splicers have some pieces, and I think that Peskin's kind of like me. He's got a couple guys that at least kind of give him a starting point for next year. I don't really even remember, like Bookbinder ended up with like Aton, right? I mean, that's the other element here is that a lot of the
Chris Dunn.
Yeah, yeah. So like a lot of the, it's interesting. So a lot of the support now, or I don't know what the right word is, like the momentum that you have going into a year is not just having these keepers that you are certain are going to be on multi-year contracts. And, a lot of this now is like faith in the LSL guys or your willingness to try and flip them for $177.
Well, part of that, and part of that is, and we've talked about this a little bit, is all of the price enforcement that's happened. So, in a league of speculators where all of these guys get price enforced, such that like DeJounte Murray and players like that, are too expensive to be kept. Brandon Ingram are too expensive to be kept. Those are the guys who used to be keepers who would be turned around. And so now you're sort of left, as you say, like squinting at LSL guys and sort of saying a soft little prayer that that Aton is going to hit. Where I think a couple of years ago, where the DeJountes and Ingrams were not going for $20-$30, where they were going for $8. There was a larger sort of market on the supply side of keepers that you could build a sort of future around. Emmer, what's your view? I mean, what would you say to all these teams who, especially the teams who took their swings this year and just came up short? I think from my view, most of the teams sold at the right time. I had no like beef with anyone like selling too early. I thought everyone competed really hard, given the hand that they were dealt. But what would you say to the teams in the middle who may be looking at something like Scorched Earth next year and thinking that that's the right play?
Well, I never thought I would be the person to defend rebuilding by competing. But I mean, I think a lot of this is kind of like affected by Porzingis' injury. Like looking at Lusky, especially, or in direct comparison to the other teams at the bottom. I think if Lusky has Booker and Porzingis on great contracts going into next year, he's looking really good. Potentially the best, among the competitors. I think you look at Jones having Embiid and Jokic.
Yeah, I was going to say he really executed what I was hoping to, right?
Right.
Having like two top guys going into the year.
Right. And as much as I would be the person to say that our incentive structure favors going Scorched Earth, like I think there is a case to be made that the people that rebuilt by competing, are in just as good of a position, are just as viable of a strategy as the people who did the opposite, especially because, DSJ and Lonzo, of course, did not work out as hoped.
I agree. I think, as I've said before, there were times this season where I really envied Lusky, your position, and I think the Porzingis, the bad luck with Porzingis, changes the analysis now. But at the time, I would have much preferred Booker and Porzingis, at least for next year, to Simmons and Mitchell. The only real difference is just the sort of time horizons. But yeah, I think both things are still viable. It's why I was not. I've always thought that was a viable strategy. For me, it's always been easier to seesaw and to scorch the earth, and I've had success with it. But yeah, I think buying Durant and LeBron and filling it in with other guys you get who pan out, as we've seen, can keep you in the mix and set you up well. So
I mean, I'd be curious actually to hear like Lusky's perspective on the other side of the arms race this year, because when I was 2 years ago deciding to go Scorched Earth, one of the reasons I chose that as opposed to the more conventional approach, rebuilding by competing, was because of that position that you're in as a seller and in whether or not you actually have bargaining leverage, over the people that you're trying to sell to. And I know this year, like when I was trying to figure out what to do with my two big chips at the end, I really felt like I just caved to everything that Lusky wanted. And that was not really what I thought was going to happen. I'm kind of curious to hear his side of like how that whole arms race negotiation went.
I mean, look, it's difficult because of what ultimately happened. But I mean, I've honestly thought about doing the exact same thing again next year. It's just I think it's a good. I think it's it's something that something that you know is going to work one way or another, right? And I do think that I was in a position where I had leverage, and one way or another, I was going to, at least acquire, assets that were going to help me.
But you,
in the
Lusky,
future.
you had moments earlier in the season where you had like lost the faith, and you not lost the faith, but you were concerned about the timing. You were concerned about injury risk. You were concerned about sort of missing the moment. Like you had those anxieties over the course of the season.
Oh, certainly. I mean, yeah. I mean, the biggest question mark is just when's the right time to strike, and like when assets start flying off the board, like some of the guys that you're targeting, then you have to kind of like get real with yourself and say like, okay, like I'm going to need to act, or I am going to miss my window. But I never got to a point where I felt backed into a corner. I mean, I do think the point when the Zinger deal happened, it like everybody kind of expected it to. No one was pissed. Nobody was surprised at that point. Like Porter had been dealt, and Jokic had been dealt, and everybody had been dealt. It was like there was one prime keeper and one top superstar available, and it was just like a marriage that needed to happen, and people were waiting on it, And it was like,
well, yeah, I think the part of that was surprising to me though was the second part. Like it wasn't that the guys that were available, like it was clear, or not the guys like the keepers, the chips that were there to be dealt. It was like the guys that were available, and so early on when when we were discussing things and you were drawing a hard line and saying I'm not going to deal both of these guys in the same deal and it's going to take a slot and $15 and I'm not going to budge. From my perspective, it was that I had alternatives. It was that there was Westbrook was out there, Giannis was out there. If Phil decided to sell, it was more that there were more like blue chips on sellers than there were top flight keepers on buyer.
Right.
Buyer.
And I actually think that way, and Horn made this comment on a previous pod, and I agree with it, which was like that was really the biggest issue for me this year was just the lack of really quality keepers that were out there in the marketplace. I mean, when Otto Porter at 59 or whatever is like the fourth best option, then it's kind of tough. So I did think that this was a poor year it just ended up being a poor year for this decision. I was frankly hoping that there would be more Chris Dunns in the world and better, better versions of that, right? Guys that were like, just fell under the radar at the draft. Because here's the reason why I said earlier, like I might try and go do the same thing next year, is that I frankly think that there's a big risk in the scorched earth thing, especially in this current climate where DeJounte Murray goes for $20. Right, like it limits your ability to take shots on these flyers. Like Horn got extremely lucky in that Mitchell. I mean, I shouldn't say that, Horn. I know that you targeted these guys from the outset, but Simmons and Mitchell both hit for you in a big way.
I took a lot of shots. Ingram probably came up short, and the key is just to have a lot of, as with all of these strategies, all these variations on the UFL strategies. It's like have a lot of lottery tickets. Like Simmons was a lottery ticket, Mitchell was a lottery ticket.
I can start rattling off the Josh Richardsons and the DeJounte Murrays. Like there were, and the Skal Labisares, like these guys that went for $20 or $30 that like they're basically waiver wire.
Ron Baker.
So like
no. Is
that the guy in Milwaukee?
Thon Maker. Sorry.
No, but so I agree that like we price in potential a lot more than we used to, and that makes the great keepers more rare. But doesn't that also make the guys that are great keepers even more valuable? Like Horn sitting on Donovan Mitchell and Ben Simmons. Like to my mind,
I was just hoping that you were going to end up with a Donovan Mitchell or a Ben Simmons and not a guy that was going scorched earth, so that I could then trade you for him.
Sure.
Yeah, it's too expensive. And to that point, if you're competing, it's too expensive to go chasing those guys. Like you can't burn $41 on Ben Simmons when you're trying to assemble an actual like competitive team.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that was the other part when I was deciding about like, should I just get some blue chips and trade them for keepers in the arms race? I was like, well, maybe the best keepers aren't necessarily going to be available because they'll be on guys that are playing for next year. Like if Gabe, I wanted Porzingis was the one that I really focused on 2 years ago. Like, what if Gabe actually isn't competitive and he wants to keep him for the following year? Then he's no longer.
Don't you see how UFBL is self-correcting? That all of this is just like the market is self-correcting, and we don't need any of these fucking rule changes.
Oh, you had to go there.
You see that, right, Emmer? You see that, right?
I see that speculation is more common in that I do think that there's going to be less and less like monster keeper contracts with a lot of savings. Yes.
So on that point, so Horn and I talked about this a lot when we had like a UAFBL quorum and for the Final Four, and we were talking a lot. I will say that the reform discussion was kind of an overwhelming topic that weekend. But you know, I made the point that like I think that yeah, I just wish that we kind of gave things another year to simmer. I think that the introduction of LSL and those big deals that occurred, I think have like they added some fuel to the reform discussion. But one thing that's interesting is that what gets lost in that is that the draft did this interesting thing this year in terms of the market correction and the fact that all of these like these lottery tickets were going for $20 or $30. Like that's interesting and that's correct. And I would love to see what that looks like in a world where LSL players were not being sold for $177 or maybe even could not be sold for $177, right? I think that is potentially a good middle ground versus doing a more dramatic measure.
Yeah, I mean, I am open to all kinds of alternatives or repeal or whatever.
Oh, you said it, man.
I would rather not talk about something that's going to antagonize like half the league and rather focus on my championship tonight.
Yeah.
So that's a good segue, and not to your championship tonight, but I thought it would be an interesting examination tonight to look at your last championship. So it's been 9 years since the last time that Leonine Faces won a UFBL championship. You're one of our. Is this our second? I think this is our third. I guess if you count Lusky's TMAC championship, our third repeat winner of the keeper era, right? So we had Lusky, Peskin has done it, of course, and then Emmer, you're the third. Is that right?
I can't remember exactly when the transition to the keeper era was.
That's right. He'll be the third manager with 2 banners up this year.
That's right. Yeah. So in 2000, hold on, I pulled up a cheat sheet for this. Bear with me for a moment. So I took a look at your last championship, and I told you guys not to look at it. The first thing I'm just going to mention this, which I thought was interesting. So in 2008, well, let me ask the question. Emmer, do you remember? So there were 12 teams in the league in 2008, not 14. But in 2008, when you last won the championship, do you remember how many roto points you totaled to win?
Oh, Jesus. So if there were we had 9 categories and 12 roto points, so 108 would have been the max. I would guess it was like 82, 83.
84
Ooh.
for your 84 win. And so 84 over 12 is 7, right? And tonight you're going to end at what? Are you going to end at 102 or 103? Where are you going to be?
Looks like 103 unless Tobias Harris goes nuts.
So 103 over 14 is like what's the average? 7 and change, basically, right? 103 over 14.
7.3.
Yeah. So I noticed the 84, and I thought that was not. I mean, you've been talking the last couple of years about like it used to be that you could win this thing at like 93 or 95. Now you need over 100. Like that's true, but like that's not inconsistent with where it was 9 years ago, in terms of the average at least.
Yeah, I don't know if comparing roto points or like the average roto points when you have 12 teams and 14 teams is necessarily right.
Why do you say?
Well, you can get more roto points per category when you have 14 teams.
That's true. Yeah.
I think like look at the trend since we've had 14 teams. Like the 4 highest roto scores over the 5-year span are all over the last 2 years. Like in the first 3 years since going to 14, Gabe would have won any of the first 3 years. Amish last year would have won any of the first 3 years.
Right. That's fair. So in 2008, do you remember which categories you were strong in and which categories you were weak in?
God, I don't know. Like I also won in 2006, And those 2 years are blending together to me now. So I know one of those 2 years I did like Dwight Howard, Darren Williams, and CP3.
This
Like
is the year that was. It was this year. It was 2008. It was the year that you won in the keeper era.
Yeah. So I was like,
let's
free throw plus elite point guard. So I'm sure I was good at dimes and steals and field goal percentage and blocks and boards.
So this was a 2-category. I mean, this was free throw and turns. You competed in 7 categories. You were last in free throw and second to last in turns, or vice versa, which is not that dissimilar from this year, right? Where you were going to be last in turns and free throw is going to be your worst category.
Well, I think it's not. The turnover part is not dissimilar from any UIFBL championship in the last 10 years.
But someday somebody's going to do it. It's either going to be me or beer, and one of us is going to fucking figure out a way to do it.
Nobody's going to do it. It's not happening.
It's the ultimate shoot the moon in UFBL. So you mentioned Chris Paul, Dwight Howard, and Darren Williams. Do you remember anyone else that you drafted that year?
Not at all.
All right. Well, I'm gonna read then your roster from this year, and each of you are gonna guess from that year. Each of you are gonna guess how much Leonine Faces paid for this player at the draft in 2007, I guess, 2008, and whoever's closer wins. So Chris Paul, Lusky, what would you guess Emmer paid for Chris Paul in 2008?
I'm gonna go 113.
Emmer?
I'll say like 95.
It was 99. Emmer gets a point.
Are you on Price is Right rules?
No, it's whoever's closer. So second is Marc Gasol. Emmer, how much do you think you paid for Marc Gasol?
Oh God, I can't remember like where he was in his career at that point.
That's why this is a funny game.
I'll say like $15.
Lusk?
$5.
Lusk gets it. He paid three. He paid $3. You were an early adapter.
Thank goodness we're not doing Price is Right rules.
I love the Gasol.
Next 1-to-1. Next was Dwight. Emmer. Who's Lusky? How much did he pay for Dwight?
Ooh, was he kept?
No, I don't think any of these guys were kept.
Ooh, I think he was, because I think I had him on my 2006 championship team. I think I kept him the whole time.
I have to pull up the fucking sheet. It doesn't matter. Okay. Make your guess.
So, all right. So, so Dwight is interesting because he has so much variability through the years. You know, like
in those days.
Remember that one year? Remember the one year? And it was like the year that he fell from grace and got hurt and stuff. But it was like the year that like he changed hands like 4 times on the day before the draft at the ranch and stuff. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna say that Dwight went for $108.
Emmer?
Wait, is this Dwight Howard or Josh Howard?
Is this Dwight Howard or Dwight Powell?
I don't know. I know I've paid a lot for Dwight over the years. I'm going to say like 75.
Emmer gets it. It was 61. Maybe he was capped. I'm not going to look at the sheet again. 2-1. Next is Darren Williams. Emmer, how much did you pay for Darren Williams?
I'll say so. CP3 was like 99, I think you said. Yeah. So I'll say like 81 for Darren.
Lusk?
Okay, so if my memory serves, Darren's on a keeper contract this year. And so I'm going to say like $32.
65.
Ooh, damn.
Emmer gets it?
I don't know. What did you say? Oh, yeah, I think so. Yeah. Emmer gets it.
So is it 3-1? 3-1?
Yeah.
All right.
It's not fair. He drafted these guys.
Dude, it's your league, dude. Things are gonna get interesting now. Next is Francisco Garcia. Mm-hmm. Whose turn is it to guess first?
Mine. I think it's mine. No, actually.
Wait. Francisco Garcia was like the Kings guy, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was getting him confused in my mind with Kevin Martin, who was actually good. Okay, Francisco Garcia. Go ahead, Emmer.
I think this one's yours, actually. I guess that.
Fuck. Francisco Garcia, I'm going to say $16.
Emmer?
I'm going to say $20.
Lusky gets it. It was $4.
Oh!
Why did you guys think that Francisco Garcia was a $20
I don't know. I thought
player?
you were throwing him in there for a reason.
No, dude, we're doing the whole fucking team.
Got him.
All right, next 3-2. Next is Ray Allen.
Oh man. He's had a wide range of prices that he went for over his career. I'm gonna say like $40.
Lusk.
41.
Ooh, Emmer gets it. It was 32.
Oh, bam! Sucks.
4-2. All right. Next is who picks first? Lusky, is this one yours?
Mm-hmm.
It's an important one.
Okay.
Do you know why it's important?
No.
Emmer, do you know why it's important?
Is it Greg Oden?
Yeah, Greg Oden is next. Yes.
I don't even remember. I mean, this was like, I'm gonna say like 26 bucks.
Emmer?
So was this the first year we went to keeper?
Yes.
So I remember thinking.
No, this is the second year. This is the year after we kicked Kenny out of the league.
Oh, that's right. Because Odin was hurt for his whole first year. So this was when I made the decision about whether to keep him or not. And I remember thinking,
this is the year that I think you changed your name to Leonine Faces.
I think it was the year before when I drafted him. And
No,
then
because when I went back to you changed your name the year before when you didn't play.
Right. Yeah. But I knew it was like I was stashing.
I mean the first year that he didn't play.
Yeah. I remember I drafted Blake Griffin, who was like out for the whole season, and I drafted Greg Oden, and I thought like I was so smart and like I was going to win the league 3 years in a row after that.
You were like Sam Henke before Sam Henke.
Wait, is the Leonine Faces thing like? I realized it was like named after Odin, but it was all. I also kind of thought it was like because you're a doctor and it was a condition. Like, is there some? I mean, it seemed kind of sciencey and weird.
Well, he is a doctor, and it is a condition, but like,
what year was this? Like 2002?
2008.
Like, you could have applied for like a rebrand or a rename, like after Boban, right? Like, so he probably has some condition as well, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Awesomeness.
I was like a second-year medical student, and I had like just read a textbook and thought the term was funny and thought it applied to Odin.
Are you thinking about rebranding?
I was thinking after the last week that I would change my name to the Fighting Tollivers.
How much did you pay for Greg Oden, dude?
I think in his rookie year it was like 15, so I'll say in year 2 it was 25 when I decided to keep him.
Wait, Lusk, what did you say? 26?
Yeah.
It was 28. Lusky gets it.
Oh man.
4-3, him?
I think that's 3-3. Or no?
We've done 1, 2, 3, 4. We've done 1, 2, 3.
I know
4,
I got
5,
you
6.
on Francisco.
That was our 7.
Garcia.
I think it's 4-3, Emmer. Should we continue, or is this tiresome?
No, this is great. Let's do a couple more. I mean, pick some. I
get the whole.
All right.
Next up is one of the Jabberwock's favorites. There was a T-shirt that I always meant to buy and wear at the ranch, but I never got around to it, which was Jason Maxiel eats babies. And the next up is the man himself, Jason Maxiel.
I did Odin, so yeah.
Yeah.
I'll say like $7.
I'm gonna say $11.
Emmer gets it. It was just $3 for Mr. Maxiel.
What a bargain.
5-3. Next up is one of Emmer's all-time favorite players, Rudy Fernandez.
Ooh.
No, I think this is me, right? I gotta go $6.
I'll say $5.
Lusky gets it. It was $16. Rudy the Straight.
Wait, isn't he? Did he? Oh no, I get him confused with Sergio Rodriguez.
Dude, Sergio Rodriguez comes up later in this pod, so just sit tight.
Okay.
Next up is it Emmer, it's yours?
Yeah.
Lusky, you once sent me some like WCL propaganda about how this player literally could jump out of the gym I think those were the words. Do you remember who
Oh,
it is?
Amir Johnson.
Amir Johnson.
Yeah.
Tyrus Thomas.
Oh, damn. This guy is so good.
Emmer, Ty Thomas.
This was when I was living in Chicago and I was watching a bunch of the Bulls and I was obsessed with the guy. I'm gonna say $24.
Ooh.
Lusk?
I was thinking 18.
It was 19. Lusk, you gets it. What are we at? 5-4?
I don't know. I think it's close.
Let's call it 5. We'll call it 5-4. Lusk. Next up is Chris Wilcox.
Okay. Wilcox.
Wait, is that his name? Chris Wilcox?
Yeah, he was good.
Yeah.
I mean, he was like a Sonic and then a Clipper. He was there's a dozen guys who are basically the modern day Wilcox, right? I mean, Montrezl is kind of like Wilcox.
I've always loved field goal percentage.
What's that?
I've always loved field goal percentage.
Yeah. I'm gonna say Wilcox was like a $13 guy.
Emmer?
I'm gonna say $4.
Yeah. It was $2.
Oh, yeah.
Emmer gets it 6-4, I think. Emmer, next up is Chris Duhon.
Oh man, another Bulls player. I'll say $2.
Yeah, I mean, that's $3.
Yeah, it was $10. Dude, I think Chris Duhon. I mean, look at your team. You had Paul, D-Will, and then he was your third guard. You didn't have any other guards. You had Francisco Garcia. Who's the modern day Duhon? What's the third guard you can get for a UFL team in 2018 for $10 to $15?
Well, I was gonna say he's Grant Hill or George Hill.
Hill, but George Hill doesn't cost $10. George Hill costs $25.
If you on accident.
Roberson when he's healthy.
No, but he's not
He doesn't even get drafted.
Point guard. How much does Trey Burke go for next year, Emmer?
I was going to save that for the portion.
Plus one.
So you sent out the outline that was best waiver wire pickups that we were going to talk about later, and I was going to save that.
So we want to talk about Trey Burke in a little bit.
Well, I mean, if we're talking about guys that are going to be kept for 3 years, then yeah, we should probably save that.
Okay. Who's up? Lusky, is this one yours?
Yeah, sure.
It's one of your
favorites.
So the
T-Wolves are going to the playoffs. We didn't talk about it.
Yeah, they won. It was great. Next up is Prisbilla, the gorilla.
Is this me?
Yeah, dude.
I mean, this was after the Prisbilla.
This is such a good podcast. Go ahead.
Oh my god!
I can't believe we don't play. I can't believe we don't have more listeners.
It's gonna be so entertaining.
What's that?
we definitely need this one in chipmunk form.
Peskin should only do chipmunk speed for this section of the podcast.
Okay, I'm gonna say on Prisbilla, I'm gonna say $16.
God, Emmer.
I think Peskin should go back to the fourth or fifth player that we did and just skip ahead from there.
I think this is gold. I think this is gold.
I'll say Prisbilla $7.
$3.
Okay,
Emmer's got enough. No, but we've got a couple big ones coming up.
Okay, fine. Let's do it.
All right, Emmer. This is another one of your favorite. This might have been the original Faces obsession. Do you know who I'm thinking of?
No, I don't.
Let's play 20 questions.
Does he suck at free throws?
I don't think so. I don't have his stats in front of me, but I don't think so.
Is he a perimeter player?
Yes.
Is he still in the league?
No.
I'm not going to get there, man. Just tell me.
Yeah, dude, you are. That's only 3 questions.
And so he's a perimeter player that you're not sure if he sucks at free throws.
I'm pretty sure he doesn't suck at. Do you want me to look at his free throws? His career free throw?
No, I'm just trying to figure out. Like, I did a muck free throw strategy in that year, so I'm trying to figure out if
Yeah,
that's.
this guy would not have been a contributor to that strategy. I don't think. Hold on. His career free throw is. I'm gonna tell you the exact number. His career free throw is 89.5%. Yeah, he was a great free throw shooter.
Oh wow, is he white?
Yes.
Is he? Does he play, or did he play that year for a Western Conference team?
I assume so.
Wait, I have a guess. I have a guess as to who this is. So after Emmer like gives up or whatever, let me guess.
I give up.
Emmer's gonna get it. It's only 5 questions, and I feel like you've already figured it out. He's a white player who's a perimeter white player with a good free throw percentage in the Western Conference, who's no longer in the league.
Did his team play in California?
It's like staring you in the fucking face. What's that?
Was his team in California?
Yes.
Were they the Lakers?
No.
Were they the Clippers?
Well, let me back up. His team this particular year was not in California, but he's best known for his time with the California team.
This makes for terrible radio, and I'm going to turn it over to Lusky for his guess.
Lusk,
no, the California thing really just threw it off for me.
Dude.
So my guess, I was thinking, it seemed to me like we were angling toward like Jason Capono or someone like that.
No, he's much better than Jason Capono, and much fonder in all of our memories.
Okay, much better. Like,
is it JJ Redick?
Oh my god!
No, he's not in the league. You already asked.
I'm really disappointed that neither of you are figuring this out.
Okay, hold on.
Oh,
the guy who was
Peja, of course, dude.
Of course.
I mean, wasn't Peja like your original obsession?
I love that guy. I still do.
Do you feel a little ashamed for not having figured it out?
I mean, I feel like that was pretty good that I got that.
Yeah, you asked all the right questions.
Clay is like the modern day Peja, right?
Not nearly as lovable.
Wait, what team did he play on that wasn't California? Did he go to like Miami or something?
New Orleans. He was on the New Orleans Hornets.
Yeah.
Wait, so when I asked if he sucked at free throws, you weren't sure?
Yeah, dude, he was always amazing.
No, I thought that. I just didn't. I wanted to confirm before I committed to it.
That was like why you drafted him.
I'm
going to say Peja was like $76.
Emmer?
I'll say like $40.
25.
What? Bargain.
25.
No wonder you killed us.
There's one more player. There's 2 more. The last one's not that interesting. There's one more that's worth doing. I kind of want to play 20 questions again for it, but nobody seemed to think that was very fun, even though I did. I think it does make for good radio.
Chipmunk mode.
Lusky, yay or nay on another round of 20 questions?
I loved it. I want to do it again. Yeah.
All right, you can do this one. So right. So this is his second to last player. Why don't I tell you the price he paid, and that can kick off your 20 questions.
Okay.
Emmer paid $20 for this player.
Okay, was he a big man?
Define big man. Yeah, he was a big. He was a big.
Okay. Did he play in the Eastern Conference?
In this particular year or best known?
Where is best known?
There's really 2. He really had 2, I would say, equally well known or well regarded stints. One in the Eastern Conference and one in the Western Conference.
Was he a Piston?
No.
Okay.
Emmer, you should feel free to jump in if you have good questions.
Is he still in the league?
No.
Was he white? Or is he white? I guess he still would be whatever he was.
You're assuming he's still alive.
You've got really interesting views on race, Emmer. Yeah, he's still alive, and as far as I know, he's still white.
Oh, he is white. A white big?
A white
big. That should narrow things down. Who was drafted?
The elusive for $20.
Is it Jason Collier?
Emmer, do you have a guess?
Does he believe in conspiracy theories?
Oh, you mean is it Bogut?
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Um, did
How
he
does
average more than a block a game?
I would argue that Bogut does not have a. I don't. I would say that Bogut is not equally well known for an Eastern Conference and a Western Conference stint.
He played for the Bucks and the Warriors.
But he's. I don't think he's. Well, what team would you most associate him with? The Bucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Where are we? Lusky, you got another question?
Yeah, I said, did he average more than a block a game?
This particular season?
Yeah.
No. In fact, he never averaged more than a block a game.
Did he score more than 20 a game?
This particular season? Or ever?
Any season?
Never.
Okay.
Was he a muck
free
throw guy?
He was a career 78.5% free throw shooter.
So no. Decent free throw shooting big white man.
Although I'll tell you this,
who could not block shots.
But listen to this. In the 3 years preceding this year that you drafted him for $20, he shot 71%, he shot 74%, 71%, and 79%. So he was a little all over the map.
Was it Pau Gasol?
No. Has Paul Gasol ever played in the Eastern Conference?
Yeah, for the Bulls.
What's that? For the Bulls, yeah.
But we already determined this guy's not in the league anymore, and Pau is.
That's right. You guys are not very good at 20 questions.
All right.
Even my 6-year-old knows the fucking rules of this game.
Dude, I'm following along. You're not giving us good enough clues. We're not asking good enough questions. All right, tell us who it is.
Give us a team
that he was on this particular year.
Yeah.
Indiana.
Oh, is it Austin Collier?
Nope. Crozier. No.
Crozier.
The Eastern Conference team is the Pacers, and the Western Conference team is the Warriors.
White dude on the Warriors. There was a big man.
Oh man.
2006.
I feel like I should know this.
Yeah, it was someone on that that We Believe team that beat the Mavs. I should know this because I hated.
Can I give you a hint?
Yeah.
He attended the University of Notre Dame.
Oh, Troy Murph.
T. Murph.
Yeah.
So it's so obvious in retrospect.
Mm-hmm. Dirty Dog favorite.
I'm going to spare you guys more of this torture, but I am going to read to you a few. Okay.
What did he go for? Like $35?
20. That was the first clue I fucking gave you, is that he went for $20. So of those players, 3 of them finished the season on Leonine Faces: Chris Paul, Dwight Howard, and Darren, which of course has its own parallels to 2018 UFBL, not so different. But here are some other players that finished their season on your team. I'm going to botch the first name. Is it Kalana Azubuike?
Kalana,
yeah. Kalana Azubuike. Will Bynum. Goran Dragic. Early Dragic. Emmer. To your
also
credit.
on my team this year.
Yeah. Javaris Crittenden.
Oh, is that the year he brought a gun to the locker room?
Was it that year? It might have been. Probably not if he ended his season on Leonine Faces. Hamed Haddadi. The aforementioned Francisco Garcia. Stephon Marbury. Al Harrington. Kenyon Martin. Shaq. Emeka Okafor. Tony Parker, Sergio Rodriguez. Wait, was it Sergio Rodriguez or Francisco Garcia who was aforementioned?
Sergio Garcia.
Oh no, it's Sergio Rodriguez.
You had Rudy Fernandez, Sergio Rodriguez, and Francisco Garcia on your team that year, dude.
Who's the guy that put 5 balls into the water at the Masters last weekend?
Stephon Marbury. All right, that was a good trip down memory lane with the 2009.
I think we're about to hit our 8-hour mark on this YouTube.
Leonhead faces.
We've lost all of our listeners.
That's all I've got on that section. Should we continue?
Yeah,
please.
So I thought we should talk a little bit more broadly about the 2017-2018 UFBL season, and in particular, we've done this on the podcast before, but I think it's worth revisiting now at the end of the season, talking about some of the other contenders who, other than Emmer and Gabe. So Sorry for Partying, Cassidy Redhawks, and the Keep Show, all of whom I think in their own way, maybe not so much with Cassidy Redhawks, but certainly with Sorry for Partying and Keep Show, deserve a hat tip for a very a strong showing, and I think a really good sort of UFBL effort on the season. Lusk, between SFP and Keep Show, is there anything that they did, any particular moves that you particularly admired or were disappointed by over the course of the season?
As usual, I mean, you never hear me say anything bad about the Keep Show. I loved that he made the move with Peskin when he did, and I just wish that we would have. I wish that that Kawhi had been healthy, and we could have seen if Phil making that bold move would have actually catapulted him into the race more than it already did. Right? I just think that like it was an unfortunate, event. Unfortunate move.
Emmer, were you worried about those moves when they happened? Were there moments where you thought, oh shit, if Kawhi actually comes back, like in those times over the course of the season where there was buzz that Kawhi was going to come back, did you think, oh fuck, if that happens, then Phil's got a real team?
Yeah, to some extent, yes. Honestly, like I was a little bit happy when it happened because I thought like the recent history of UAFBL is that we have a lot of red weddings, and I thought that Phil, like, he had a great team. I don't mean to like take anything away from the team that he drafted, but I thought that the way things went early on and just like some situations not working out for him, I thought that like he probably wasn't going to be in striking distance of me and Gabe. And so I was hopeful that he would want to do a red wedding. And so him having more assets on his team at that time, I thought could be a good thing for me, that I could try to like deal one of my guys to get not just Giannis, but maybe like a Giannis and, a combo of Giannis and Kawhi.
Mm-hmm.
So at the time, I wasn't like necessarily like worried when it happened because he was also like, with the way things went, he was coming from a position where he was pretty far back. But he had a potentially like very threatening team. He was on my radar, and I was worried about him in general.
Yeah, when I've competed in the past, I've always been relieved to see just more contenders. Like having to compete with just one or two other managers, I think is more stressful and intimidating than when there's like five guys who are all trying to acquire players, and you're not worried that every deal that you don't execute means that player goes to your like nearest rival.
Right.
So yeah. Go ahead.
And at the time, like, Lusky was making a lot of noise about like, this is the year the sellers fight back. And, I'm drawing a hard line. Like, I'm not going to deal both guys in the same trade. And so having more options, alternatives to what he was offering was good to me, like a Giannis Kawhi, like if Kawhi is healthy, a Giannis Kawhi package is, just as, attractive to me as what he might be offering.
Emmer, I don't think we've had you on. We have lauded Sorry for Partying on this podcast before, but I don't think we've had you on to talk about it. I expect that what you're going to say is that you never really thought that beer was going to be a serious contender, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. What was your view of Sorry for Partying as of like late January, early February?
I mean, first of all, I think he crushed the draft. Like, I think he, his draft was 100 times better than mine, and it was better than Gabe's. I think I was a skeptic from the beginning because I just didn't think the muck turnover if you didn't muck turnovers, I didn't think that trying to compete in turnovers was a viable strategy. And, I begrudgingly have to admit that I think it is. I wonder, like, the other part of his team was blocks, and he was essentially mucking blocks while competing in turnovers. And I was nervous at the arms race if he made a big move in blocks and picked up a bunch of points there. Like if he had gotten AD or someone
Right.
else, where would his team max out? Like, I think that's always been my, or not always, but more recently has been my skepticism about competing in turnovers. Has been more like, what does that do to your counting stats and how high can you max out? And I don't know, like, I think early on, honestly, I probably kind of like dismissed his competitiveness, but he maintained it the whole year. And the fact that like towards the end, he had a 14, 14, 14, like in field goal percentage, free throw percentage, and threes. Like if you're good in threes, generally speaking, like you suffer in field goal percentage. And he had like perfect numbers across the board in both percentages and threes. And that makes up for a lot. And he got absolutely devastated by injuries. And I don't think I fully appreciated this until like he approached me about a red wedding at the end. And I was looking at like, what did he have to offer me that would improve my chances down the stretch? And I realized that like so many of the guys that got him to where he was just got, knocked out of the season by injuries. I tip my hat to him. He proved a lot of my doubts and skepticism wrong. He absolutely had a hell of a year. And, I think, I don't want to wade back into the whole reform, rule change discussion, but like, I think he should be rewarded for this year. I think he deserved to win a championship this year. It was a hell of a draft that he had.
Yeah, I'm looking at his team log, and it's just like, 60 games from Kyrie, 51 from Love, 65 from Harris, 39 from Brogdon, 46 from Otto, 50 from Vooch.
Vooch got hurt.
Like every one of these guys just missed weeks for him.
It's not just like the timing, or I mean, it's not just the number of like games that you missed too. It's also the timing. So like, I felt like early on in the season, I had some bad luck with injuries. Like I drafted CP3 and Wall, and for the first half of the season, like there was never a time where both of them were healthy. Like they kind of alternated being like out, but like that was okay because it like clarified my needs down the stretch. And for the second half of the season, like I actually stayed like super healthy. Like, Whiteside missed 10 games or so in the stretch and the post All-Star break.
That was like the worst thing that happened to you.
Yeah, but I mean, like everybody else, including AD, most importantly, stayed healthy.
Yep.
I had a lot of injury luck.
Yep. And Gabe was on the other end of all of that luck. I mean, you got it, and he didn't.
Yeah, I mean, if Steph Curry by himself played the last 10, 20 games of the season, Gabe has passed both Glaspie and T-Mac in threes. He's probably passed Weig in steals. That makes it 102 to 102 going into the last night tonight.
Then you're not fucking around with your turnover guys.
Yeah, right. I don't know that it ultimately changes things. It would make it way.
Well, it was Steph and Boogie, both of them.
And Boogie, yeah, but I mean, like, so I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to minimize or anything, but like, so for Boogie, let's say he played, like Gabe was first in rebounds already, so that's not going to help him anymore. It comes down to categories, right? Like,
sure.
Like if I were trying to choose the guys on his team that got hurt, I would have chosen Steph number 1, and I would have chosen Gobert number 2. If Boogie played or he didn't play, especially in the context of Nurkic and Vooch, and
well, but he wouldn't have made it's all sort of a silly thing to do in retrospect because he wouldn't have made the same moves if Boogie was healthy. So I mean, I don't think he would have bothered acquiring like Nurk and whatever.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah.
So
I guess all I'm trying to say is like, I think Steph was like a critical person for him to lose, and I think that for me, like I had some injuries early on, but like it allowed me to plan later on. In the guys that got injured, like Wall and CP3, primarily, like I could like I didn't need that as much. Like I'm ending the season way up in dimes and the
Yeah,
things that point guards do. Like I absorbed my injuries at positions where it was easier to absorb them. And I think that the Scurry injury like cost Gabe the championship arguably. And if not the championship, like it at least would have made it like super, super close down the
right.
stretch.
Yeah.
And Gobert too. I mean, if Gobert was healthy, like Gabe probably flips blocks on me. That 2-point swing could have been huge.
Right. Yep. Yeah. He had all the bad luck down the stretch. Lusk, what from your perspective and moving past the Lonzo and Dennis Smith deals, what do you think what were like the inflection points for this race in terms of in-season trades? And I think you probably have a really good perspective on it, having been involved in a lot of those discussions. What do you think in retrospect, like moved the needle the most for this race during the season?
I mean, I think the single biggest deal was, and it's not just because of the Zinger injury. I think even if Zinger had not gone down, just the field goal flip that you get in trading Porzingis for Anthony Davis was, in my mind, clearly the singular move that Emmer had to make and did make in order to kind of like solidify his position, right? Just like when you get a guy that is going to give you 55 or 60%, every night at a high volume, and you're trading a guy who's been shooting at the time, he wasn't even shooting 40%, right? I mean, Porzingis had been shooting terribly. And so I think Emmer was like as desperate to get Porzingis off of his team as he was to get Anthony Davis at that point. I'm not as close to a lot of the other deals that happened. Like I wasn't, I mean, just in all honesty, I wasn't, I was more focused on like who was winning in terms of the seller buyer dynamic than in terms of, is this a good move for the buyer in terms of the overall race? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Emmer, what do you think? What was Anthony Davis the move this year?
I mean, I guess. I think like before all of that happened, my choice was basically like caving to Lusky on Anthony Davis and Durant in the same deal versus like trying to split it up. So like the deal that Lusky had offered me was KD and AD for both of my guys plus $4. And I ended up like splitting it up. And I sent Jokic to Jones for the Harden and Whiteside deal. And I sent Porzingis to Lusky for AD. That was like the big decision that I had to make. With the alternative, that I had really wanted to do was like dealing with Weeg for Cat, which we haven't talked about. But like, for a good like month or almost 2 months, like I had thought I was going to do something there. So like just juggling all of those options was like kind of the key to the arms race for me.
Yeah. Lusk, what about the Wire? I don't think either Chupacabras or Leonine Faces had. I mean, Emmer, you played the Wire well down the stretch and got some guys who helped at the end. Gabe had some, I think, mid-season, one or two that I can think of. But Lusk, were there any waiver wire pickups that stood out to you this season?
I mean, wasn't Damari Carroll a waiver wire pickup for Gabe? We've talked about.
No, I think he drafted Carroll.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a bunch of waiver wire pickups just that across other teams that.
Are there any waiver wire guys who are going to be keepers?
Yeah. I have a sheet. Let me pull it up.
Please.
Yeah.
If you want to do the 20 questions thing again, I'll give you a hint. He played point guard for the University of Michigan in 2013.
Naismith Player of the Year.
He is not on my keeper sheet. I will say that much. No, I fully encourage you to keep him.
I mean, I think so. I think Dinwiddie was a waiver pickup, right?
Yeah, he was at the top of my list for this.
Yeah, I think that he's the clear winner for the best waiver
Yeah.
pickup.
On the whole year?
Well, for the for contending teams.
Sure.
That actually,
I mean, is anyone else going to be kept that was picked up?
That's what I'm looking at. Let me see.
I don't think so.
So I'm looking.
Dwight Powell was a waiver wire pickup who you could argue could be kept. He was pretty good.
Make that argument to me.
Powell? I mean, Powell had. I mean, if we look at his splits, I mean, he's very clearly on the maybe lower end list. But did you? I mean, were you paying attention to his game? To his?
I'm looking at his game log as we speak.
I mean, he had some stretches there. He had. I mean, in the month of February, he played 10. I'm just saying, there was that stretch in February where he had 14 and 8 with a steal a game. And shot 62% from the field.
Who else?
I mean, that's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
So I also
wrote
down. I wrote down Bismack Biyombo, and I'm not sure how much he ended up playing for Beer, but when Vooch got hurt and he picked up Biyombo, especially when I thought like maybe he was going to try to make a run for it in blocks, like I thought that was a really nice pickup.
Yeah, I don't think there's any other waiver wire guys that are on my list. I mean, there's a bunch of like $1 players that I think will be kept, like Terry Rozier, for example.
Am I wrong, or I feel like in the past we've had more guys off the wire, sort of flirting with keeper status? Mm-hmm. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're right.
I've got to give a shout out to my guy Anthony Tolliver.
He's been your best player the last 2 weeks.
He has.
He's been the platonic ideal of the stretch run Leonine phases. High threes, low turnovers, no turnovers. I mean, how many turnovers has he had for you, or on the season?
He played 6 games for me, and he had 24 threes. He had 6 blocks, and he had 5 turnovers.
Wow.
And the rest of it doesn't matter because I wasn't competing.
So he averaged So he averaged in 6 games. He averaged 4 threes and 0.8 turnovers.
Right, more blocks than turnovers.
That's amazing. All right, I think we're good. I mean, there's another section that I think is probably best saved for another night sometime this summer.
Do you want to hear a status check on where I'm standing in this WCL race? It's not good.
I don't want that, but I know that all of our listeners do.
Okay, well, here's what happened was Donovan Mitchell went out there and he opened up going 0 for 8 from the field. And he lost me a point that I haven't even been considering in field goal percentage. And so that at one point tonight, I was solidly an 8th, about to compete for 7th or about to capture 7th. And at this time, I think that I'm currently tied for 8th, but I still have a shot here at if Donovan can be somebody in the second half. I'm only 2 points behind in the points category. So if Donovan can kind of up his game, then we might be able to be in 8th all by ourselves.
From 8th place in WCL to 1st place in UFBL, Emmer, what are you drinking tonight, man?
I picked up a bottle of scotch on the way home.
Big baller scotch?
I wish. There is a big baller bottled water from Lithuania, but they have no scotch.
We'll get you a bottle of that for to celebrate at Fox Creek Ranch. Can
I ask you guys one more question before we go off the air?
Yeah,
you can ask me 20 questions.
So Horn knows what I'm talking about here with UAFB GC, the UAFBL.
Oh, Lusky knows about it. I told everybody about it. Lusky, you might not have been around. I told Mitch and Haidt and Weeg about UAFB GC.
What is this?
So
it's just a measure. Go ahead, Emmer.
Yeah, so it's a subjective measure. Like, don't overthink it. It's a scale of like 1 to 10.
Tell them what it stands for.
UAFBL gut check. GC gut check. We really need a better name, but
no, it's a good name. So it's like it's often used, Lusky, for like we used it a lot for like a Michigan basketball player. So like after a particular game, it'd be like, what's your UAFBGC on like Duncan Robinson, or like what's your UAFBGC on like you know uh, uh, you know Xavier Simpson, and
Yeah.
on a scale of 1 to 10.
Yeah, your emotional happiness with a player. Like
Okay.
you draft
At that
guy.
moment.
Like for me,
And
the
it's just a
floor of
snapshot.
the
It's like in that
scale.
instant.
Yeah, the floor of the scale for me is like West Matt when I drafted him like 2 or 3 years ago, and the peak is a guy who just like exceeds your expectations.
Anthony Tolliver.
Anthony Tolliver, yeah, from West.
It's Mo Wagner after like the Loyola game or something.
Right. So my question for you guys is, of the guys you drafted, who's your highest, who's your lowest?
Of our players, UAFBGC right now.
Yeah, or like guys that are on your roster now. I don't know.
Okay, I gotta look. It's actually fun doing this when you're a bottom dweller, right?
My highest UAFBGC, I mean, and I'm not just saying this as like a laugh, but is Taurean Prince, at least right now, at this instant, because Simmons and Mitchell I've sort of acclimated to their greatness. Prince has been sort of a late bloomer, and of course has every time Lusky criticizes him, he goes off for like a 4 or 5 week stretch of like top 30 playing, and is ending on such a stretch. So
I think he might be a top 30 player all time, all NBA all time.
I think you're right. And so at this moment, I just feel I'm beaming with pride and self-satisfaction about Taurean Prince.
That was also my experience with Jokic last year.
Where every time Lusky opened his mouth, it like his value increased like twofold.
Exactly, yeah.
Mine is not Porzingis. My UAFBGC favorite is Rozier. I read an article that got me really excited about Rozier, just in terms of the Celtics cap position and how, like, if Ainge is who we think he is, and based on all the shrewd moves he's made, that like Rozier, the best thing to have happened to Danny Ainge in the second half of this year with all these injuries is that Rozier has basically demonstrated that he's Kyle Lowry if he's given a starting job and the reins somewhere, and that if he was smart, that what he would do from a cap perspective is deal Rozier to a team that desperately needs talent and get like a top draft pick in return, because he's in a position with Rozier and Smart where he's going to have to choose one or the other. And so if that were to happen during the offseason, then that suddenly materializes for me, which is like what I've been waiting for since draft day.
Who's your lowest UAFBGC, Lusk?
Lowest? The guy that I think the least of?
You're the guy that you just feel like the crummiest about now at this moment.
Look at his name on your like team page and you just like feel like you just don't like the guy.
I mean, one guy that I'm consistently shocked by how good he's been this year, because you guys all talk about him. I feel like whenever I play this guessing game with my team, everybody guesses this one guy that I like him, and I actually don't. It's Eachwan Moore. Everybody's like, oh, he's talking about Eachwan Moore. And I'm like, Eachwan Moore sucks. No, really. But what is so Eachwan Moore, I think, is terrible, but he has shot 51% this year somehow, while hitting a bunch of threes. But anyway, he's my lowest.
He's like Paul George, but good.
Yeah, he is better than Paul George, probably.
What is your UAFB GC on Dario Saric?
3-year keeper. He is my bet. I like him better than any of my other like guys that I'm keeping next year.
But not as much as Terry Rozier.
No, I mean Rozier I'm excited about because of the possibilities, right? But like Saric, I feel like pretty confident in and feel like even with Fultz coming in and them having like too much talent, I think just in watching them play this year, I think the Sixers are playing like a top 3 overall NBA team right now. They're incredible, and I think Saric has more to do with that than people realize.
Yeah, he's great.
Like
Lusky
I will tell you, in the game that I watched him versus Jokic, and I'm not just saying this because of the kind of like joking history with Jokic, but Saric
sorry, you mean the yoking history with Jokic?
exactly. But I thought Saric he outplayed him basically. He D'd him up, and he had a better offensive game than him. So he was he's a really good player, different kind of player, but really good player.
Lusky is incapable of any kind of like frank criticism of his own players.
What do you mean? I criticize.
You were asked for your least favorite UAF BGC, and you ended up talking about how fucking Saric is better than Jokic.
No, I told you each one more was my least favorite UAF GC, and then Emmer pressed me on Saric.
Emmer, what's your Wall is your low UAF BGC, right?
Oh, for sure, yeah. Maybe Wiggins. I don't know. Wall or Wiggins.
Wait,
Wiggins
Wiggins is still on your team?
Well, no. I mean, I spent $25 on him, but no, he's not on my team.
How did you get off Wiggins?
I sent him to Height for Harry Barnes.
Oh yeah, that was a good deal.
Yeah, it's probably the best deal I made of the seasons. Honestly,
talk to me about your relationship with Harry Barnes.
He's a warm body. He doesn't. He doesn't turn it over much. He knocks down some threes, and his percentages don't suck. And beyond that, I don't care.
Very good. Well, on that note, let me say I know we're not supposed to talk about anything anymore in UFBL because we're a bunch of fucking snowflakes. But your championship this year is, and I'm going to try and wrap this up. Your championship this year was very well deserved. I thought that when LSL was introduced, one thing that I liked about it was that it created this new dynamic, and there were going to be different ways to explore it. And I think we're still figuring that out. And it's to your credit that with the rules changed and this new element was introduced, you immediately seized on what the opportunity was. And it may not have worked out as well as it did for you, but you saw that there was an opportunity to invest very little in maximizing your opportunity for LSL with the first pick. And you did it, and it all landed, and it was to your credit. And it's that's the kind of engagement with UAFBL and with the rules that I like, and that I think makes our league fun. And so, of all the things that happened with Leonine Faces over the last year or 2 years now, that initial move to set all this in place is the thing that I appreciate the most. So well done on that.
Well, thank you. I think the Montrezl for Lonzo deal was crucial.
I would say
that was amazing. Yeah, well done, Emmer. Well thought out win, years in the making. Applaud you for this.
Thank you. I did want to ask you, Horn, one more question, but
that was it, man. That was the moment. That was. But go ahead.
All right. Well, I'm just curious. I'm curious about your approach. How you kind of like did a hybrid or like middle ground between rebuilding by competing versus scorched earth, right? Like you didn't spend a bunch of cash to lock up a keeper or an LSL asset, but you also just buy guys that had current value in the hopes of like flipping them later.
Yeah, it all really goes back to that moment on the Thursday night at the ranch when I was seriously considering buying Lonzo from you. I mean, you and I were in talks about Lonzo that day, and I remember your disappointment when I was not willing to spend the kind of money that Height was willing to spend on Lonzo, and I've given Height shit for it since. But really, the reason that I wasn't prepared to spend that kind of money was just I didn't want to put all my eggs in that basket, and I liked the idea of, as I've said 14 times tonight and 14,000 times on this pod, like you have to have a number of lottery tickets because you don't know which one's going to hit. And so, spending $40 on Simmons and $17 on Mitchell and $36 on Ingram and $23 on Randall and just sort of taking all those shots, I thought was the best way to land a couple chips, and it turned out to work. And then in terms of just like getting guys like DeAndre and Isaiah, who I wasn't able to flip because he was hurt, but guys who I thought would just be affordable pieces that I could flip for slots and maybe another keeper or just cash or whatever. Like that's the easy part. Like I don't think that part of a muck season is hard. I think it's height. I think also may have. I don't think it's like a huge error by him, but like spending whatever he's $70 or $80 on Conley is a lot more compromising for him because again he's putting all of his eggs in that basket than me spending whatever $20 on Willie Cauley-Stein and $30 or $40 on DeAndre and I think that part should be pretty easy for anyone who's looking at a strategy like mine for next year. Not get too carried away worrying about who your sort of real current value players are going to be to flip. If all you're looking for is like a slot or cash, you don't need to get too carried away.
Yeah.
See, I told you that my ending was going to be better. All right, guys. Well, this is a good pod. I'm glad we got to do it again. We should not. We've been bad about recording, but we should do a good summer pod. There's a lot going on. I had stuff on the rundown for tonight that we didn't get to about looking forward to next season. I'm really excited about UFBL. Really excited about the changes that are coming or the debates over those changes that are coming. And really excited that Mitch is joining the league. I think it's gonna be really great next year. And it's our 10th year at Fox Creek Ranch, so we should start thinking about what kind of black tie gala we want to throw for ourselves.
We should.
All right. Well, I am going to be staying up tonight, hoping that Joe Ingles doesn't get 19 turnovers.
I think you got it.
Just because you didn't take Horn's advice.
Well, Gerald Green has 4 threes and no turnovers in the first half.
Mm-hmm.
Dude,
all right, well, guys.
All right, congrats.
Good night, guys. Congratulations, Leonide Faces.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.